Mum, however, was a different matter. All 5 kittens would jump all over her, just as kittens do, chasing each other and leaping athletically over their mother. A great game. But when Lexi had had enough, she'd give her children a backhander or grab them by the scruff of their necks to tell them, "Enough, stop now." She was a loving cat, but she was also a very do-as-you're-told type of mother, and the kittens learned to stay in line. They learned other things from her too. When the time came, Lexi, who was an absolutely spotless cat when it came to hygiene, showed them how to use a litter tray so well that all 5 kittens became impeccably house-trained. As time passed, the kittens stopped suckling from Lexi and the Briscoes moved them on to the recommended diet of raw mince mixed with egg. They didn't want to use the shop-bought kitten food that some did. Nothing but the best for those kittens born on Egyptian cotton towels. Instead, they were weaned on the freshest, highest quality mince with raw egg hand-beaten into it. Food of champions. One of the tabby kittens, the one who became known as Spadge and who would eventually go to live with the Briscoe's son, certainly agreed with that sentiment. He asserted himself early on and would always be the first at the food. In the Briscoe's own words, he was a greedy little oik. Amid the loud protestations of his mewling siblings, he decided he was getting in first and nobody else could have a look in until he was finished. The kittens were a noisy, confident, outgoing bunch. They meowed when they wanted their dinner and Spadge was in the way, but they also mewed when they were playing and had been known to let out a chorus of squeals during spirited boxing matches with one another. At night, when they were fast asleep after dinner, wiped out by their mega exciting day, there were always a lot of soft little purrs coming from the Vela brown and white cat bed where the siblings all slept. In addition to Spadge revealing that he was the greedy one, the kittens asserted their individual personalities in other ways too. The black and white duo became known as the Terrible Twins, for a favourite game of theirs was to latch on to Chris's trousers while he was having a quiet sit-down, just like 2 furry pin badges. The kittens would make themselves quiet and still so that Chris had no idea they were there. Then, when he stood up to make his way upstairs, he'd suddenly find that he had 10 or 20 claws stuck into his legs as the cats clung resolutely to his trousers. Those super sharp claws would scrape his skin when he moved. "What the hell is that?" he'd cry, feeling them scratch. And one black and white kitten or another would cheekily cock its head to one side, enjoying the drama of his roars of pain and the oh-so-sweet sensation of being carried through the air on his trousers. They climbed up his legs all the time, so after only a few weeks, Chris was walking around looking as though he'd made it a new favourite habit to clamber through viciously spiked brambles on a daily basis. He redoubled his efforts to find permanent homes for the Terrible Twins. And here at last, he heard on the railway network that Angie Hunt had been putting out a message of her own. Huddersfield Station wanted to employ a station cat. Did anyone know of any kittens who might be up to the job? It was important to Angie and the team that it was a kitten who joined them. It wouldn't have been fair to an older, former house cat to throw it in at the deep end in a working environment. What with the danger of the trains and the noise and bustle of a busy station, Huddersfield hosted approximately 5 million customers' journeys each year with 15 trains per hour, which placed it in the top 100 busiest stations in the country. You couldn't teach an old cat the kind of new tricks that a railway cat would need to learn. But if a kitten grew up there, it would learn on the job how to be a station cat. Angie and Chris soon met up to talk all things kitten. At that time, Chris was often at Huddersfield for work, so a meeting was easy enough to arrange. Angie greeted him with one of her classic beaming smiles. "So, we're looking to decrease our pest control bill," she said, eyes sparkling with good humour. "Go a bit greener and employ a kitten instead. I hear you might be able to help. How much are you wanting for them?" I'm not wanting anything for them, Chris replied quickly, thinking of the scratches on his legs. In the nicest possible way, he was going to be rather pleased to be shot of the kittens. To know that he wasn't going to be stuck with at least one of the terrible twins was great news. In addition, given the network nature of the railway, he thought there was also a bit of kudos in the fact that it was going to be his cat that would be the Huddersfield station cat, that he would be its granddaddy. He would never live that one down. Above all, though, he and Joanne were simply pleased that the kitten would be going to a permanent loving home, where the Briscoes could be sure that it was going to be well looked after. In fact, judging by the grin on Angie's face when he agreed that she could have one of the kittens, it was going to be downright spoiled. We'd like a boy, Angie added, almost as an afterthought as they drew the conversation to a close. After all, she and the team didn't want to push it. It felt like a miracle that HQ had agreed to the station cat. Nobody thought that the powers that be would appreciate having kittens on top of that. So everyone felt safer if the new recruit was a boy. As it happened, Chris didn't actually know the gender of the kittens, and when the train dispatcher who planned to take the two tabby cats came to visit her new charges at his home, he openly confessed his ignorance. I don't know how to sex kittens, he admitted. You'll have to do it yourself. Unfazed, the dispatcher picked up the tabby cats and said, that one's definitely a boy, and that's definitely a girl. She would go on to call them Percy and Max, respectively. Then she reached over and plucked one of the black and white kittens from the basket and turned it upside down. Definitely a boy, she announced. She picked up his twin, the fluffy one, and did the same. There was so much long hair, fur, around its bits that it was a little harder to see, but she made a pronouncement nonetheless. Definitely a boy. She seemed to know what she was talking about. Chris let Angie know the good news. Both the black and white kittens were boys, so she could take her pick. There was good news for Chris too. A lady who worked in the Huddersfield booking office, Pam, had said that her mum would give a home to whichever kitten the station didn't want. So both of them would be off his hands for good. Joanne and Chris assessed the terrible twins as they scampered boisterously about the house. Apart from the fact that one was a lot fluffier than the other, there was barely any difference between them. They'd noticed only one thing that marked them out. The kittens, as you'd expect, had a heap of toys to play with, some actual toys and some hijacked by the kittens in fun. They had a scratching post with a ball on a string, and in their turn, all the kittens had climbed up the pole and then dived off, jumping on the ball. There were half a dozen squeaky mice for them to pounce on, too, and it was one of these mice toys that differentiated the twins. It was one of those toys where you'd pull the string at the side and the mouse would vibrate really, really quickly, making it skid along the floor. One of the black and white kittens was absolutely terrified of it, but the other was in his element. Over and over he'd jump on it, pounce on it, boom, game over, killer instinct in action. So, which one do you think should become the railway cat? Joanne mused aloud. She was a short, smiling woman with blonde highlights and a great sense of humour, though this issue was no laughing matter. It seemed a rather serious question to be debating the future of these kittens as they gambled, obviously, about the place, investigating every new sight, sound and smell with a kitten's classic inquisitiveness. The five hadn't been outdoors at all yet, as they weren't inoculated. There were enough new experiences in their home to keep them occupied for weeks. But the lure of the train tracks, the rhythm of the trains, the hours and hours of walking about on cold platforms in the middle of the night. To Joanne's mind, the fluffier of the two seemed more suited to this occupation, for even at this young age, that kitten seemed to be taking after his dad, Gizmo, who was a total fluffball and enormous because of it. Surely a nice thick fur coat would stand a station cat in good stead. The other kitten had shorter hair and was nowhere near as large. Chris described them both to Angie. One's really big and fluffy like his dad, he told her. Well, we'll have that one then, she said decisively. Angie liked the idea of having the fluffiest cat. And this little kitten really was a fluff ball, currently no larger than the size of a man's hand. Chris sent her some snapshots of the kittens, and that's when the team really knew this dream was coming true. Angie showcased the photographs all around the office, more smile than woman, as she did so. Meet our little cat, she said to Gareth, as she showed off the photographs as proudly as any new mum would snaps of her newborn. Gareth grinned right back at her. We've done it, haven't we? He said. We've only gone and done it. But there was still a lot to sort out before the railway cat could arrive. He couldn't leave his mum until he was at least 8 weeks old, so in the meantime, the station team began preparing for their little boy's arrival. They got fleecy blankets for him to sleep on and bought a white plastic double aperture bowl for his food and drink. There was a lot of excitement around the office at the thought that soon the newest member of the team would be joining them. Judging by the enthusiasm on everyone's faces, this little kitten was going to be the most popular colleague at the station by quite some distance. But not everyone was thrilled by the promise of the new arrival. Some colleagues even started talking up the fact that they were highly allergic to cats and that therefore the whole plan should be called off. But these allergies were something they had never once mentioned during Gareth's 3-year campaign to get a cat, so he didn't really buy it. But Chris Briscoe, for one, was definitely looking forward to the terrible twins moving out. Each night, he and Joanne had to have a roll call for the kittens to find out where they got to, as they were forever playing hide and seek and trying to get into places where they shouldn't be. Right, how many have you got? Chris would say, his hands full of tiny tabby cat, as Joanne picked her way across the living room floor and exclaimed, There's one at the side of the fireplace. Those two would be returned to Lexi's side, placed gently into the snug brown and white cat bed. But by the time the other 3 had been located, the first 2 would have gone AWOL again. Tiring as it was, Chris's daughter thought she would be very sad to see her new friends move on, as they were due to any day now. Lucy Briscoe was 11 years old and besotted with the kittens. She and the Briscoes' granddaughter, 6-year-old Ellie, had taken the lead in getting the kittens used to humans, so they were forever picking them up and giving them cuddles, as were Joanne and Chris, in all honesty. All 5 little ones had received an equal amount of human playtime, personal affection, and friendship in their formative first 8 weeks. The Briscoes would, in some ways, be sorry to see them go. And that day came all too soon. On Tuesday, the 12th of July 2011, the kittens reached an all-important milestone. They were now exactly 8 weeks old. It was time for the members of the litter to say goodbye to each other and hello to their brand new homes. Spadge was the first to leave, moving out to live with the Briscoe's son in Sheffield. A day or so later, Max and Percy headed off to their new lives in Manchester. Now, only the as-yet unnamed black and white kittens remained. Both would be heading to Huddersfield Station on Thursday the 14th of July, aged 8 weeks and 2 days. It was time for the terrible twins to take a journey they would never forget. Chapter 4, Welcome to Huddersfield. In you get, Chris Briscoe urged the terrible twins. The 2 little kittens looked blankly at him, not understanding this new game. In the end, he scooped each one up and placed them together in the grey plastic carry case for their journey to the station. They sniffed suspiciously at their new surroundings and began mewing plaintively at their unfamiliarity. The plastic arched over their heads. At the front of the carrier was a wire mesh door, which Chris now closed firmly. The kittens cried even louder as it clunked shut, but their mother didn't respond to their melancholy mews. Lexi had wanted to go out earlier and was off having her own adventures in the large garden outside. To Chris's mind, she had enough of her offspring by now and wanted to get on with her own life. 3 of the kittens had already left home when the Briscoes got back to Rotherham that night and let Lexi back in. She would merely sniff at the basket where she'd reared her family, realise the kittens had now all gone, and then carry on with life with no visible sign of distress at their departure. The same could not be said for her kittens at that moment, though. As Chris lifted the carry case and he and Joanne made their way outside, both tiny tots scurried to the back of the carrier as fast as they could, looking for a place to hide. They huddled together, senses alert, as Chris and Joanne made their way to a nearby station. They were catching the train to Huddersfield, taking the Penistone line. Deep inside the carry case, as close to the back wall as they could get, the kittens clustered together, their ears pricked up as high as they had ever been. The world for them was suddenly full of loud, never-before-heard noises, the slam of car doors, the trilling of birdsong, the electronic beep of the ticket gates. New smells flooded in through the mesh door. Earth, air, plants, animals, humans, and new sights seemed to burn their very retinas, all spotlit by the brightness of the July sun. It was totally overwhelming. The terrible twins fell into a terrible silence, and as they boarded the train with the Briscoes and heard the colossal roar of the engine booming into life, they scarcely dared to breathe. What on earth could make a noise like that? Yet, as the journey progressed and the kittens slowly grew more used to the gentle rocking motion of the train and the intermittent noises, they found their courage gradually returned, egging each other on as they had done when scaling curtains higher and higher in the Briscoes' home. They edged closer to the wire door and bravely peeked out, noses pressed to the gaps in the wire and twitching furiously as they tried to decipher the cryptogram of smells that accosted their tiny nostrils. Halfway to Huddersfield, Chris and Joanne decided to check on their precious cargo. But when they discovered the duo at the front of the case, the kittens, spooked by the intrusion, skedaddled to the back once again. They were very, very quiet throughout the whole journey, so Chris and Joanne leaned back in their seats and left them to it. Gone were the noisy outgoing twins who had caused such mayhem wherever they went. This first trip to the outside world had left the kittens reeling. After about half an hour, the train screeched to a halt at their destination, Huddersfield. The station cat, though, little did he know it, was home. Yet it wasn't a very happy homecoming. Both kittens had been frightened by the banshee scream of the brakes and the subsequent beep, beep, beep of the opening doors. They started crying again, a mewling noise that seemed to say, "Mum, where are you? I need you, and I'm hungry and so cold. Where am I?" All at once. But as Chris lifted the carrier and he and Joanne disembarked from the train, the kittens' cries were suddenly curtailed. They felt the swaying movement of the basket around them and realised with a nervous gulp, something's up. Once off the train, the world seemed even noisier, though it was a relatively quiet time on the station concourse, about mid-morning, so well after the rush hour for the kittens. Experienced their very first day in the outside world, it was like landing on a whole new planet. Even the air felt different, colder and fresher than they were used to at home. But it was the loud noises and the alien smells that were really mind-boggling. Station announcements robotically echoed around the chamber of the carrier. Running footsteps punctuated every pounding heartbeat in the kittens' tiny little chests. And all the while, the terrible twins swayed and scattered inside the roomy carrier as they were buffeted up the platform in rhythm with Chris's purposeful strides. The party of 4 was ushered into the communal announcer's office, scene of so many station cat brainstorming sessions, and the door shut tightly behind them. Peace of a sort fell. With the carrying case plonked firmly on an office desk, the team on duty gathered around, all excited whispers and prying eyes, trying to catch a glimpse of the station cat. Chris and Joanne lifted the lid off the carrier, and each took hold of a squirming black and white kitten. Though the cats were used to being handled, having played happily for hours with Chris's daughter and granddaughter at the Briscoes' home, this was now a whole different ball game, and not a fun one. "Ouch!" Chris exclaimed as his kitten swiped at him with a well-aimed paw, and those telltale bramble scratches appeared on his hands. "Easy now," he urged. "It's all right. You're safe." Pam from the booking office was one of those present at the all-important handover as her mum was giving a home to the shorter-haired kitten. She phoned her and said, "Come now, Mum, they're here." They were indeed. Bright eyes cautiously flickered as the kittens took in the office environment, peeking out shyly between the fingers of the Briscoes' hands. They'd never seen anything like it before. Computer screens glimmered and changed before their eyes as new trains came into the station and the programs updated. Microphones crackled and buzzed, and all around were things to climb and roll on, piles of paper in trays, filing cabinets and desks. The team gathered round, cooing at the kittens and fussing over them. Chris had known he'd have no worries about leaving the kittens there, and he didn't. If anything, the team were over-prepared for the arrival of their bundle of joy. Joanne and Chris smiled at each other as the kittens fidgeted in their hands. This was it. It was time to let the kittens go, to let them spread their wings and fly. "So, we've nominated this one as the Railway Cat," Chris announced to the curious colleagues, nodding at the piebald fluff ball in Joanne's hands. The biggest, fluffiest kitten of them all, just as Angie Hume had wanted. "And Pam, I believe you're having this one." He handed the shorter-haired kitten over to the red-haired Pam. In the next few minutes, her mum would arrive and whisk him away in her car. The kittens would be named Luther, and he would grow up to become a tall, elegant cat, sleek rather than fluffy, who would live with Pam's mum and dad together with another cat called Mo in a house by a river where there would be plenty of vermin on tap for him to catch. He became a character in his own right and never again saw his terrible twin with whom he had once spent so many happy hours playing. Now all eyes turned to the station cat as Joanne gently stroked his fluffy black fur, so soft to the touch. His still blue kitten eyes darted around, taking in the faces of his new family. They were exclaiming at his tiny size, his snowy paws, at the miniature proportions of his nose compared to his big white whiskers which took over his entire face. Those whiskers twitched as the kitten wrinkled his nostrils, taking in the sense of photocopying various perfumes and brought from home handmade tuna sandwiches. The kitten almost seemed to think, pausing for a moment. Food. Now that smells good. His on-alert ears took in all the sounds cascaded around him. "Oh, isn't he handsome?" the team chorused. "Isn't he just gorgeous?" Their voices were like a torrent of noise washing over the kitten, and at that moment sounding about as welcome to him as a bucket of iced water. Joanne bent and placed the little feline gently on the carpeted floor. "This is home," she told him. Whoosh! The kitten legged it, no messing. He darted straight under the computer table to safety, from where he could work out what the heck was going on. Everyone in the room chuckled indulgently. There would be time enough for making friends and for showing the new recruit the ropes. The Briscoes closed up the carrier with a satisfying click, ready to head back home. But before he left, Chris bent down and locked eyes with the piebald kitten who was now sitting comfortably under the desk. Chris knew what lay ahead for this cat. He was to become the new pest controller at Huddersfield Station. He had a job with TPE, and so he was, to all intents and purposes now, a colleague. A grin lit up Chris's bearded face. "Bye for now," he said lightly to the little kitten. "See you at work on Monday." And that's where I'll leave it.